Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Let's get back to the topic of demand. So in the last video, we talked about why does the demand curve have the shape that it does, which is the negatively sloped relationship between price of good one and quantity of good one. And I left you with a question. I said, think about a good, burgers. We know that the demand for burgers is a negatively sloped line, which tells us that as the price of burgers goes up, the quantity that we buy goes down. The question I left you with was, what other factors will help you either buy more or less burgers? So hopefully you gave it some thought, and in this video we will talk about those factors. So income is an important factor. So think about if income of good changes, your parents give you more money, how many more burgers will you buy? So that might seem trivial, but this relationship might not always be positive. So I'm sure your answer was correct, which is if I have more money, I will buy more burgers. That doesn't mean that you'll buy 5 at a time, but in general, over time, you will buy more burgers than if you have less money. Now think about examples where that might not be the case. Is it possible to have a good where if your income goes up, you'll actually buy less of that good? So think about that, and I'll define what a normal good is. A normal good is a good where if your income goes up, you'll buy more, and if your income goes down, you'll buy less. So in relation to the demand curve, if you're talking about a good which is considered a normal good, what that means is as your income goes up, the demand goes up, and as your income goes down, demand goes down. All right, so that's a normal. It doesn't mean, it's nothing to do with normal or non-normal, it's just the word given to this kind of good. An inferior good, again, it doesn't mean it's a bad good, it's just the word given to it. An inferior good is a good where the relationship is negative. Right, so now, if our income goes up, we'll buy less of that good, and if our income goes down, we'll buy more of that good. So there's a negative relationship between income and demand. So hopefully you thought of that good. There aren't too many goods. Majority of the goods we buy are considered normal goods, where if we have more money, we'll buy more. But think about public transportation. So if you make a lot less money, you might be traveling by bus or auto or something like that. But if your income goes up, now you might buy yourself a scooter or a car or something like that, and you will demand less of a public transportation like a bus service. So there are very few goods which are inferior, which means that as you make more money, you will buy less of that because there's something else you can afford. But majority of the goods we buy are considered to have a positive relationship between how much income we have and how much of that good we demand. What else? What else do you think is going to cause us to buy more or less burgers or any good? So think about other goods, right? So we'll define what substitutes and complements are. So far all I've said is if the price of good one goes up, how much more of good one do I buy? Or if income goes up, how much more of good one do I buy? Now think about price of another good and how many of good one or how much of good one you want to buy. So let me define it, and then we'll talk about examples and related to that. So two goods that are considered substitutes is that if a price of good one goes down, then the amount or the demand for the other good also goes down, right? So they move in the same direction. And complements is the opposite, where if there's a fall in the price of good one, it's going to increase the demand of the other good. So again, don't try to memorize this. Just think of examples and you will make your life a lot easier as well. So let's again consider burgers, right? So if you're thinking of how many burgers to buy, if the price of pizza goes up, now I'm assuming that for most of us, burgers and pizza are substitutes. We can either eat burger or we can eat pizza, depending on what we are feeling on the day. So if the price of, so our good is burgers, and what's changing is the price of pizza. All right, so now that you have an understanding of how price of a good affects quantity of another good, make sure you don't try to memorize this. Just try to remember the relationships, all right? Again, always think of examples, right? Burgers and pizza are examples of substitutes. So the price of pizza goes up, then we are going to want to buy more burgers, or if the price of pizza goes down, we will buy less burgers because they are substitutes. Tea and coffee is another example of goods that are substitutable. Apples or oranges might be another example. So anything that you think you can either consume X or Y, those are substitutes. All right, and always think about the price of that rather than memorizing this definition. And complements are, burgers and fries for most people, or burgers and a cold drink for most people are complements. So if the price of cold drinks goes up, people might buy less burgers because it's more expensive to buy both of the goods together. Or tennis rackets and tennis balls. If the price of tennis rackets goes up, there'll be fewer tennis balls that are being demanded because you need one to be able to use the other. So that's what we mean by complements and substitutes. If the price and the demand of the other good go in the same direction, they are substitutes. And if the price and the demand of the other good go in opposite directions, they're complements. But again, I would very highly encourage you not to memorize the definitions, but try to think of it in terms of examples. All right, so far we've seen how income changes the demand of a good and how price of another good changes the demand of the good we want to talk about. Now let's try to put everything together and see how that affects the demand curve. All right, so in terms of what we've drawn so far, what we've assumed is we've only looked at the relationship between price of good one and the quantity of good one, which is the demand curve, right? The same good and the same price. Now in this video, what you've learned is that income has an effect on how much of good one I want to buy. Price of another good has an effect on how much of good one I want to buy. So let's see how we can put all of that on the demand curve graph that we've seen to be able to analyze a little bit more in depth of how many burgers we are going to end up buying. All right, so one thing before I do that is, and this is it might seem trivial, but it's a very important concept, is what causes you to move along the demand curve versus what causes the demand curve itself to move. So keep this in mind. If there is a change in the price of the good we are talking about, so quantity of burgers, price of burgers, if the price of burgers changes, you will always move along the demand curve. That's the very definition of what demand means, right? It's a relationship between P and Q. If there's anything other than price that changes, and so far you've seen income and price of other goods, then you will have to move the whole demand curve. So this is a very important concept, and students often make a mistake here because they forget whether we should be moving along the demand curve or we should be moving the demand curve altogether. And again, an easy way to remember it is whatever good you're looking at, if the price of that good changes, you always move along the demand curve. You never move the curve. If there is anything other than the price of the good that's changing, then you have to move the demand curve. So just remember that. That's an important thing to know. So let's stick with the example of burgers. Some of the factors that we have discussed is income, and income can have both positive or negative effect. So in the case of burgers, it's probably a normal good where as a whole, if people have more money, if your parents give you a lot more money, you might go have more burgers with your friends or have it 2 or 3 times a week. And if they give you less money, you'll buy less. All right. So the other thing is price of related goods. So price of related goods in relation to burgers is the price of fries, or French fries, or pizza, or cold drink, right? So some of them are substitutes, some of them are complements. So most of us like to have a cold drink with our burgers, so those are going to be complements. Where if the price of a cold drink goes up, we'll buy less burgers, so they are negatively related. And in relation to pizza, if the price of pizza goes up, I'll buy more burgers because now I will substitute away from pizza to a burger, so it's a positive relationship. So the reason I have plus and minus here is that both income and price of related goods can affect our good in terms of it can have this positive relationship in terms of if income goes up, I'll buy more, or if income goes down, I'll buy less, or it can have the opposite effect. If income goes up, I'll buy less. If income goes down, I'll buy more, as in the case of an inferior good like public transportation. The third thing is taste and preferences. So if for some reason consumers start to like the taste of burgers, then the demand for burgers will go up as well. Right? So that's nothing more than that. And the last thing is how many buyers there are. So there are more people in a city or more people in a country, then there are going to be a higher demand for burgers than before. So points 3 and 4 are pretty easy. Points 1 and 2, make sure you understand them thoroughly because they can go both ways depending on the good you are consuming. All right, so income can have a positive or a negative effect on the good you're consuming. Price of another good can also have a positive or negative effect on a good we are consuming, depending on whether they are A, normal or inferior good, and B, substitutes or complements. So make sure you understand all this, and we'll put it all in a graph as well. So here we have quantity of burgers and the price of burgers. You have the demand curve for burgers. You will move along this curve if what happens? That's right, if the price of burgers changes, you will move along this demand curve, right? You might, if the price goes down, you'll buy more. If the price goes up, you'll buy less. Now, if there's something else that's changing, so think of, and I'll go over this and think of a reason that might lead to this. An increase in demand is the curve moving to the right, and a decrease in demand is the curve moving to the left. So assuming burgers is a normal good, if your parents give you more money, this whole line moves outward. If your parents give you less money, this curve will move inward. All right, and again, you can work with pizzas or cold drinks or French fries and understand what would cause the demand curve to move or decrease. All right, so hopefully, you're getting this concept because it's very important. So if you're talking about an inferior good, if your income goes up, again, we've talked about it theoretically just to make sure that you don't forget it, and I've used public transportation. So think about, people who travel by bus. If their income goes up, then they will want to travel less by bus and maybe get a car. So if public transportation is an inferior good, then as your income goes up, you will buy less, or you'll travel less by buses, as opposed to burgers, which is a normal good. Right? So make sure you understand the shift in the demand curve based on both a normal and an inferior good. So hopefully you're clear with that. So let's do a question. All right? So I'll read the question and pause, or you should pause the video and then get back and look at the answer. So which of the following will cause an increase in the demand for cars? Right? So obviously it cannot be the price of cars, because that will lead you to move along the demand curve. We are saying what will cause the whole demand curve to move. So there are 4 options. Price of car tires increases, quality of cars decreases, gasoline prices drops, or there's a new metro that gets built in your city. So let's go through each of them. So price of tires is not going to make you buy more or less cars. The tires comes with the car. You don't pay separately for tires. So that's not going to affect your demand curve. The quality of cars decreases. This will actually have the opposite effect. So go back to the tastes and preferences point. If the quality of cars decreases, we'll buy less cars, not more. So it'll have the opposite effect. We are saying what increases, right? Increases the demand for cars. If gas prices goes down, now using gasoline and car are complements. So this in the whole market will increase the demand for cars. If gas becomes cheaper, if it's very cheap for us to fill up our tank in our cars, then we will demand more cars, as in the whole market. And the last one is a substitute for cars. So if there's a new metro that gets built in a city, on average people will buy fewer cars because they can use their public transportation. So the right answer is that gasoline prices dropping will cause us to demand more cars. So it's very, you have to be very clear on what are substitutes, what are complements, is it a normal good, inferior good, to be able to answer some of these questions. So I'm going to end this video with a question, and I want you to do it both theoretically and graphically. So what I want you to draw, you're going to be drawing 3 changes, all right? So you're going to be drawing the demand curve for music downloads. So think about downloading music from iTunes, right, on your Apple device or any other device that you use. That's the market. So the market is for music downloads. And there are going to be 3 things that is happening, and you're going to be drawing 3 graphs representing each of those shifts. One is the price of iPods falls, or an iPhone, any device in which you can listen to music. So iPods is what you need to be able to listen to that music that you download from iTunes. So think about that relationship. The second thing is the price of music downloads is changing. In this case, it's falling. And the third thing is price of CDs is falling. So again, think about how are CDs in relation to music downloads? How is iPod related to music downloads? So you'll be drawing your demand curve for music downloads, and you'll be drawing 3 graphs and showing me on each of those how you either move along the demand curve or you move the demand curve when each of these happen. So in the next video, I will start by doing that question, and then we'll talk about what's the difference between an individual and a market demand curve. So we're going to put things, when I've talked about my consumption of burgers or your consumption of burgers, how do we add that up to get to the market level of burgers or the consumption of burgers in the market? That's the next topic. But I will start the next video with solving this problem, which hopefully you do and not just look at the answer. All right, so we'll start next video with that.